My name is Bridget Mercer. At 8 years old, my mother dumped me into foster care like I was garbage she couldn't wait to throw out. No tears, no goodbye. She simply signed the papers, drove home 11 miles away, close enough to see the lights of every house where I was breaking, and never looked back. 16 years later, at the Gala where they handed me Woman of the Year for the $9 million I'd raised to house kids like me, she slipped in, eyes glued to the floor, and whispered, "Hello, I'm—" The entire room fell deathly silent. 400 guests froze, every eye on me. I had known she was coming for 3 weeks. Tonight, the mother who threw me away was finally going to pay for every single mile she never bothered to cross. If your chest just tightened a little, do me a favor and tap subscribe. It's the only way stories like this one ever find the people who need them. And tell me in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is there. I like knowing who's in the room with me. My name is Bridget Mercer. This is the story of 11 miles and the night that distance finally closed. Let me take you back, all the way back, to a kitchen in Ohio. The trophy was heavier than I expected. That's the thing nobody tells you about award nights. The crystal has weight. They put it in your hands and you feel your own name pressing down against your palms. And for 1 second, you understand exactly how far you've come, measured in pounds. The ballroom in downtown Cleveland was full. 400 people, round tables, white linen, the kind of cold that money buys. Air conditioning cranked high so nobody sweats through a rented tux. A string trio played something polite near the windows. I stood at the podium, and the spotlight was warm, even when the room wasn't. They were still clapping. Somewhere near the back, a server set down a tray of champagne, and the glasses caught the light and threw it across the ceiling. And then a voice cut underneath the applause, small and rehearsed. "Hello, I didn't have to turn to know. There are voices the body files away before the mind agrees to. 16 years, and mine still had hers in a drawer it never opened. I turned anyway. She was standing at the edge of the room, just past the last table, in a navy dress that had been good a decade ago. Her eyes were on the floor. Her hands moved against each other like she was washing them. Beside her, half a step back, a woman I almost didn't recognize. Thinner than I remembered, paler, hands knotted in front of her like she was holding herself together at the seams, like the seams had been giving for a while. 400 people followed my gaze. The applause died, the way a wave dies, all at once, and then in pieces, until the only sound left was the trio. And then, even they stopped, one instrument at a time. I am 24 years old. I run a place called Mercer House. We take kids who age out of foster care, the ones the system hands a garbage bag and a bus pass on their 18th birthday, and we give them an address, a real one, with their name on the door. $9 million has moved through that house in 6 years. Not into my pocket, into beds and rent. And the first month's deposit no 18-year-old can cover alone, and the security I never got to feel until I built it myself. A boy named Tyler stood in our lobby once, the week we opened the second floor, reading the little nameplate beside his room. He ran his thumb over it twice, like he was checking it was real. "This is my first real address," he said. "I have a waiting list now. I hate the waiting list. Every name on it is a kid in a cold room somewhere counting exits. That's why they were giving me a trophy. That's why the room was full of people in good clothes who'd written good checks. And that, I understood the moment I heard her voice, was exactly why she had finally come looking. Not despite the gala, because of it. You don't reappear after 16 years for a daughter. You reappear for a daughter who's worth something now." I set the crystal down on the podium. I straightened the microphone. I did not raise my voice, and I did not move toward her, because I had learned a long time ago that the people who throw you away expect you to scream or to run, and I had stopped, very deliberately, giving people what they expected. I knew that voice before I saw her face. Some people throw you away in slow motion. Some children are kept. Some children are filed. The skates cost $28,000 a season. I know that number because my mother said it out loud at the kitchen table, the way other mothers say, grace. Blades, boots, coaching, ice time before school and after. The travel to qualifiers in 3 states. The dresses sewn by a woman in Cleveland who only worked in crystals, the kind that caught the rink lights and threw them back like the ice itself was applauding. $28,000 every year, poured into my sister Brooke like water into a glass that would never be full. Brooke was the one with a future. Everyone agreed on that, the way a town agrees on the weather. She was 11 when I was 8, and already the rink in Tallmadge had her name printed on the elite track roster, and coaches drove in from 2 counties over to watch her do her long program. She skated like the ice owed her something. I'll give her that, even now. When Brooke was on the ice, you stopped talking. My mother, Lorraine, used to stand at the boards with her coffee going cold in both hands, not drinking it, just watching. The way you watch weather you've bet the house on. I watched too. I was the one up in the bleachers with a library book, because the rink was cold and the books were free, and nobody minded where I sat as long as I didn't make noise during Brooke's run. I had a spot, 3rd row, against the wall, where the heat vent leaked a little warmth. I knew the Zamboni schedule. I knew which vending machine gave you 2 if you hit it right. A child learns the geography of the places she's left to wait in. There was an evening, I must have been 7, when practice ran late and the rink emptied and my mother and Brooke went out to warm up the car. And they forgot me. Not cruelly, they just forgot. I sat in the 3rd row for 20 minutes in the dark before the car came back. And when it did, my mother laughed and said, "Oh, Bridget, you're so easy, you didn't even cry." Like it was a compliment. Like being forgettable was a skill I'd been kind enough to learn. "Brooke's the one with a future," she told me another time, not unkindly. That was always the worst part. She wasn't cruel about it. You're easy, you'll be fine. Easy. I held that word for years before I understood what it meant. Easy meant low maintenance. Easy meant you could be set down somewhere and left, and you wouldn't make a sound loud enough to ruin the drive home. Easy meant disposable. I'd learn that soon enough. On my 8th birthday, she gave me a keychain. A little plastic ice skate, white, the kind they sell in a bin by the rink register, next to the laces and the blade guards. $5. It still had the price sticker on the back, a little orange dot. "It's just this season, sweetheart," she said, and she ruffled my hair the way she did when she wanted a thing to land soft. "The money's tight. We have to think about Brooke's qualifiers. Next year's yours. I promise." There was always a next year. Next year was a country I never got a visa to. That same afternoon, on the same kitchen table, Brooke unwrapped a pair of custom boots molded to the exact shape of her ankles, white leather, and my mother actually cried a little, pressed her knuckles to her mouth, and Brooke squealed. And I sat on the kitchen floor with my back against the cabinet, peeling the orange price sticker off a plastic skate. I kept the sticker. I don't fully know why. I was 8. I just understood, in the wordless way children understand the temperature of a house, that someday I might need to remember exactly what I had been worth, in numbers, so that no one could ever tell me I'd made it up. 16 years later, I would stand in a ballroom in front of 400 people and make them do the math out loud. I still have that $5 tag. 3 months later, there was a different piece of paper on the kitchen table. I remember the form because of the pen. A blue ballpoint chewed at the cap, the one that lived in the cup by the phone. My mother sat with the form squared in front of her like a placemat and read it the way you read a permission slip for a school field trip. There was a man from the county in our living room with a soft voice and a laminated badge on a lanyard, and he kept looking at me and then looking away. "It's just until things settle," she told me. She didn't look up from the paper. "Then I'll come get you. I promise. You know, I promise." She signed it. The pen scratched once, twice. The man from the county clicked his own pen closed and said something gentle that I didn't hear because there was a sound in my ears like the inside of a shell. She signed me away like a permission slip. The drive was 11 miles. I counted the exits because counting was the only thing in the car I could control. Our house to the first foster home, 11 miles of highway, 2 exits, a Sunoco station halfway with a sign that flickered on the S. I pressed my forehead to the cold glass and counted, and I memorized the route the way kids memorize the things that might save them, because I was sure, I was so sure that I'd need to know the way back. 11 miles. Close enough to come back any Sunday she wanted. She didn't. A budget tells you exactly who someone loves. The county caseworker's name was Patricia Vance. Everyone called her Pat. She had a binder for me that got thicker every year, and a way of crouching down to my eye level when she talked, even after I got too old and too tall for it. The first time I met her, the night I arrived at the first home. I was 8 and shaking so hard, my teeth knocked together, and without a word, she took off her own coat, a gray wool thing that smelled like cold air and coffee, and put it around my shoulders, then said, too brightly, that she'd been overheating in it anyway. It took me years, and eventually my own case file, to understand the shape of what happened next, the rhythm of a kindness and a quiet wrong that ran side by side for a decade. In the early years, the county kept trying to find me a permanent home. A family would look at my photo twice. A hearing would get scheduled to change my goal from reunification to adoption. And every time, right at the edge, my mother would surface. She'd sign a case plan, show up to one supervised visit, bring a stuffed animal, cry a little, sit through a single parenting class and collect the certificate. Just enough to reset the clock, to keep the official goal marked reunification, to make a judge sigh and grant another 6 months for a mother who was clearly, the record said, trying. Then she'd vanish until the next hearing put me back at risk of belonging to someone else. And then, this is the part that took me the longest to understand, she didn't have to do even that anymore, because I got older, and older children don't get chosen. The little ones get the families, we get the placements. By the time I was 11, 12, no one was scheduling hearings to free me, because no one was waiting on the other side to take me. The clock didn't need resetting. It had simply stopped meaning anything. I wasn't a child anyone was fighting over. I was a file that stayed open because closing it would have required somebody to want me. And the only person in the world with the right to want me kept signing the same 4 lines and driving home. There was a hearing when I was 10 that I was made to attend. I sat on a wooden bench in a county hallway that smelled like floor wax and waited while adults decided things on the other side of a heavy door. My mother arrived late, in a good coat, and she didn't sit beside me. She sat across the hall and checked her watch twice. When the door finally opened, a lawyer told her she'd done just enough to keep the case open another 6 months, and she nodded the way a woman nods when she's told her car is ready, and she gathered her purse and left before I did. She did not say goodbye in the hallway. She had somewhere to be at 4. Brooke had practice at 4. I asked Pat about it once, after that, when I was 15 and had stopped expecting answers I'd like. For a few years, your mom kept resetting the clock, Pat said. She wasn't looking at me. She was looking at the binder, at all those signatures. And every time, she let it run out. She paused, and her jaw worked once. And then you got old enough that nobody was asking for you anymore, and she didn't even have to do that. She just left you open. I didn't cry, By then, I had a rule about not crying where it could be used. Here's what nobody explains to a kid in care. The system is built to send you home. It bends toward reunification, like a plant bends toward a window. It is mostly a good instinct. Most kids should go home. But it means a parent who does the bare minimum can keep that window cracked open for years, and a child can sit in the draft of it the whole time. And the longer you sit, the older you get, and the older you get, the quieter the room around your case becomes, until one day, the only thing keeping you from a family is a signature nobody's bothering to take back. Never quite adopted, never quite wanted. Just kept. Kept the way you keep a receipt you might need someday. 9 houses. 9 houses in 10 years. A blue plastic suitcase came with me to each one, and I got the packing down to under 20 minutes, because 20 minutes was usually all the notice. I learned to read a house in a day. I learned which families wanted a kid and which wanted the check that came with one. The third house had a woman who counted out my dinner portions against the reimbursement and called it teaching me discipline. The fifth house was fine, actually, quiet and clean, and they were going to keep me, the worker said. They were really thinking about it. And then my mother signed one more case plan, and the goal flipped back to reunification. And the fifth house, who couldn't adopt a child who wasn't free, let me go with a card and a $20 bill. In the fourth house, there was a boy, a little younger than me, also in care, also quiet. One night the dinner was thin, and I was still hungry and trying hard not to show it, because showing it got you labeled difficult. Across the table, he slid his plate at me without looking up. "You can have mine," he said. "I'm not that hungry." He was lying. He was always hungry. I'd watched him eat. I've spent good money in my life and never bought anything worth what that plate was worth. I never forgot it. 9 houses. Not one of them was the 11 miles back. When I was 12, a letter came. It was the only one she ever sent. A cream envelope, my name in her handwriting. The loops I'd have known in the dark. I carried it into the bathroom of the 6th house and locked the door and sat on the cold edge of the tub to read it, because privacy was the one thing that house had plenty of. "Things are complicated right now," it said. "I'll come get you when they settle. Love, Mom." That was all. 4 lines and a signature. I read it until the words came apart and stopped being words and were just shapes she'd made with the chewed blue pen. A slap, you can understand. A slap is over the second it lands. But hope is the longest sentence a child can serve. And she had just handed me 4 lines of it in her own neat hand and signed it, "Love, Mom." I kept it. Of course I kept it. I keep things. That's the whole story, really. The shortest version of it. She throws away, and I keep. There was a year I stopped counting the miles. I was 15. I took 2 city buses across the county on a Saturday I'd told no one about, transferred downtown, walked the last half mile, and stood across the street from the house I'd been signed away from. Same house, same porch light, yellow, with a moth working it. Through the front window, I watched my mother and Brooke come in from the rink, Brooke still in her warm-up jacket, both of them laughing about something. And my mother reached up and brushed snow off Brooke's shoulder, slow, with the back of her hand, the way you touch a thing you're afraid of losing. I had a speech ready. I'd written it on the bus, edited it on the transfer. It started with, "Do you remember me?" which tells you everything about what I'd let myself become. I never used it. I stood on the far sidewalk in the cold until the cold went all the way through me and out the other side, and I watched the windows go dark, one at a time. The living room, then the hall, then the upstairs. And I understood something I hadn't allowed myself to understand for 7 years of counting exits. She wasn't trapped. She wasn't waiting for things to settle. There was nothing complicated. She just wasn't coming, and she was never going to come, and the 11 miles had never been the problem. I walked back to the bus stop, and I did not look over my shoulder. Not once, the whole way. That night, I stopped facing east. She could always have come. She simply chose not to. So much of this story is people deciding what I was worth. The next person just made room. The 9th house smelled like bread. I want you to have that detail because I had so little of it. Donna Pruitt baked on Sundays. Badly, the loaves came out dense and a little scorched at one end, and the whole house filled up with the smell, warm and burnt and good. And that is the first thing I remember about the last place the state ever sent me. Donna was 61 and had fostered teenagers for 2 decades. The ones nobody else would take. The ones who came with thick files and thin trust. She didn't hug me when I walked in with my blue suitcase. She didn't promise me anything. She showed me a shelf, a real wooden shelf, in a room that would be mine. "This is yours," she said. "I don't make promises, I make room." I had heard every promise a person can hear. I'd never once been handed a shelf. She kept my box. That's the thing I still can't get all the way past. By then, the blue suitcase had a shoebox inside it, the $5 tag, the letter, 3 drawings, a single photo of a sister who'd never come looking. Donna never opened it. I checked the tape. But a few months in, going through a closet, she found a drawing I'd done at 7 and lost somewhere around the 3rd house. A crooked house with 2 suns in a green sky, and instead of handing it back, she'd bought a frame at the drugstore and hung it in the hallway, at eye level, where you'd see it coming and going. I asked her why. "Because it's good," she said, already turning back to her bad bread. "And because someday, it'll be worth something to you. It does not heal you. Nothing heals you, but it rearranges the math. It puts one number on the other side of a ledger that, until then, had only ever shown what I cost." She kept my box. All of it. I aged out at 18. There is no ceremony for that. You turn 18, and the funding stops, and the state closes your case and wishes you well. Most kids get a few hours' notice and a 30-gallon garbage bag for their belongings. I got a little more than that because Donna spent 2 months on the phone fighting for a transition plan. But the morning still came when there was a bus to catch and a life to start with nothing under it. She drove me to the station in her old Buick. Neither of us said much. We weren't a talking pair. At the curb, she reached into her purse and pulled out a bundle of envelopes held with a brittle rubber band. Letters I'd written over the years to my mother and never sent. I'd handed them to Donna, one at a time, to keep, because you hand someone the things you can't trust yourself to hold. She pressed the bundle into my hands and closed my fingers over it. "You wrote these," she said. "You're the one who gets to decide what they're worth now." The bus was already idling, and the diesel smell of it was in everything, and my throat did a thing it hadn't done in years. A hard catch, and I looked down at the rubber band so I would not have to look at Donna's face. "I didn't mail them. I filed them. You can build a home out of exactly what's left." I started Mercer House out of a 1-bedroom apartment and a spreadsheet, and a fury I'd turned into something useful. I knew the problem better than any consultant alive, because I had fallen off the exact cliff I wanted to fence. 18, and the floor disappears. I knew the first thing those kids needed wasn't a workshop or a motivational speaker. It was an address. A door that locked from the inside. A name on a wall that nobody could revise at a hearing. For the first 2 years, it was just me. 4 borrowed beds, a fire code inspection I barely passed, and a lot of asking strangers for money with my hands shaking. I waited tables at night. I learned to read a lease and a grant application, and the particular face a landlord makes when he hears the words, "former foster youth." There was a month, in the 2nd year, when I almost lost the whole thing. A grant fell through in October, and rent came due in November, and I had 4 kids in beds I couldn't pay for. I sat in my car outside the building one night and did the math on a napkin, and the math said close. I thought about the fifth foster house, the one that would have kept me if I'd been free, and how a thing can be good and still let you go because the paperwork doesn't allow it. I decided that night I would not be paperwork to anyone. I waited tables an extra 3 shifts, called every name in my phone, and made rent 4 days late with a personal check that should have bounced and somehow didn't. Nobody moved out of a bed. That's the version of me my mother never met, the one who counts exits and refuses to use them. Then a local reporter did a small piece. She came for an afternoon, and she watched a kid named Tyler read the nameplate by his door, and she heard him say the thing about a first real address, and she put it in the leady. The piece traveled the way true things sometimes do, jumping from the local paper to somewhere bigger. Donations came in, tens and then thousands. A board formed, and a developer named Gerald Voss read the article on a delayed flight out of Cleveland and called my cell directly at 7 the next morning and asked, with no hello, what I would do with a building if a man happened to have one sitting empty. 6 years. $9 million, cumulative, in beds and deposits and rent, and one renovated building with 22 doors. A board, a staff, a waiting list I hate. And eventually, a printed program with my name on it and the words Woman of the Year underneath. It was around then that I saw a different Mercer in the news. Just a small item, local, the kind you'd scroll past. Brooke Mercer's skating academy was in financial trouble. 2 Mercers in the news that same month. Only one of us was rising. The first text came from a number I didn't recognize. Hi, Bridget. Your family would love to reconnect before your big night. Can we talk? I read it twice. 16 years of total silence, and now, 3 weeks out from the gala, a message that knew the word family and the words big night. Somebody had been reading about me. Somebody had a calendar. I didn't answer. A second text came 2 days later, then a third, each a little warmer. Each pretending we had a history of warmth to return to. We're so proud. It's been too long. Brooke would love to see her sister. I didn't answer those either, but I started paying attention. And attention is a thing I'm good at. It didn't take long to find. Brooke's skating career had ended at 17. A hip injury, a bad landing at a regional, the kind of thing that heals enough to walk and never enough to compete. She'd spent the years since trying to turn a name into a business. First, Brooke Mercer figure skating, private lessons, then a whole academy with leased ice and hired coaches and a logo. It had grown fast on borrowed money, and then it had collapsed, the way things built on borrowed money do. A notice was taped to the inside of the front glass at the rink, and somebody had photographed it for the paper. Notice of default, it read, in the flat language of those things. Premises to be surrendered. $1.2 million in debt. Coaches who hadn't been paid in months. Parents owed refunds for blocks of lessons their kids would never take, some of them angry enough to talk to a reporter. And a deadline, buried in the article. The lease default came due the same week as my gala. I read that line twice too, the same week. They didn't want money from me. The money was already gone. You can't squeeze a daughter dry enough to cover $1.2 million. Then Brooke called. Not a text this time, a call, an actual call, at 9 at night from the same unknown number. I let it ring 3 times. I am still not entirely sure why I picked up on the 4th. Her voice was wrong. Sanded down to nothing. There was a hollow sound behind her, the specific echo of a large, empty room. And I understood, with a cold drop in my stomach, that my sister was sitting inside the building she was about to lose, in the dark, calling me. She's going to do something, Brooke said. No hello. At your gala, I told her not to. She won't listen to me. A breath that shook on the way out. I'm so tired, Bridge. Nobody had called me Bridge in 16 years. The word landed somewhere old. I haven't been well, she said, quieter, like she was confessing it. Months now. The doctors keep running tests, and the stress just... It took me apart, Bridge. I'm not the way you remember. A small, broken laugh. Not that you'd remember much. I held the phone against my ear and said nothing, and Brooke filled the silence the way exhausted people do, in pieces that don't connect. Mom had a plan, a public moment with the cameras there. Something about a man named Voss, about how if it looked like the family was back together, if it looked like Bridget was standing behind them, then the people you owe money to get patient, then maybe somebody steps in, then maybe the academy doesn't have to be the end of everything. I know what she did to you, Brooke said near the end, so quietly I almost missed it under the rink's echo. But I always knew you were 11 miles away. She used to say it at dinner like it was a weather report. Bridget's settled, she's fine, she's easy. And I just eat. I never once said, "Where's my sister?" Her voice thinned out to almost nothing. I'm not calling to ask you for anything. I'm calling because she's going to use you tomorrow. And somebody in this family should warn you for once. My sister warned me. Out of everything that happened that month, that surprised me most. It took me an hour at the kitchen table with the Gala guest list and that old article and a legal pad to understand the exact shape of what was coming. Gerald Voss was on the guest list. Of course he was. He'd funded half the building. But Voss wasn't only a donor. He was the kind of man whose name, attached to a thing, made banks patient and creditors blink and other money show up to the party. And my mother, drowning, sharp the way drowning people get sharp, had grasped the one true thing in her whole situation, that the single most valuable asset she had any claim on in this world was me, not my bank account, my credibility, a photograph of a tearful reunion, a quote about family and forgiveness, a woman of the year standing, even silently, beside a struggling academy, and just like that, the Mercer name flips from a default notice to a comeback story. Just like that, Voss might back a relaunch. Just like that, the creditors wait another quarter. They didn't need my money. They needed my name standing next to theirs. Long enough to buy time. There was one email I could send first. The people who leave always come back hungry. I want to be precise about what happened next, because this is the part people tend to get wrong about me. I did not plan a confrontation. I am not built for the scene where you scream the truth across a crowded room and everyone gasps. I'd spent a childhood learning, in 9 houses, that the loud ones get labeled difficult and the difficult ones get moved. What I am good at is the quiet thing, done early, before anyone is watching, in time for it to matter. I sat at my desk 3 weeks before the gala with the calendar open on the screen, and I understood, the way you understand a chess position you've been staring at long enough, that for once, I was not on defense. I had been on defense my entire life, bracing, packing in under 20 minutes, waiting for a car that wasn't coming, keeping receipts against a day I might need to prove I existed. This was the first time the next move was mine to make. I didn't need to win the gala, I needed to win the week before it. So I started with Gerald Voss. I didn't write him a long letter. Long letters are what you send when you're afraid you won't be believed. I wrote 4 lines. Gerald, before the gala, there's something about my family you should hear from me, and not from a performance. Can we talk privately? B. He called within the hour, and we met 2 days later in the corner of a quiet hotel restaurant, a pot of coffee between us that neither of us touched. I'm not going to give you that conversation yet. I'll give it to you when my mother gives it to herself. In the room, in front of 400 people, which is the only place it belongs. For now, know only this. I reached the one man she was hunting, and I reached him first. Then I went quiet. and I let them plan. That is the part nobody expects. I didn't warn my mother off. I didn't decline the reunion or block the number or threaten anyone. I let her keep believing I knew nothing at all, because a trap only works if the person walking into it is sure they're the one who built it. Let her rehearse. Let her pick the navy dress. I made one more call. Patricia Vance had retired by then, somewhere outside Canton. It took me 3 tries and an old county directory to find her. When I said my name and reminded her who I was, she went so still on the line that I thought the call had dropped. "I never forgot your case," Pat said finally. Her voice was rougher than I remembered, older. "Worked 1,000 of them. Yours I never forgot. If you ever decided to tell it, out loud, where it counts, I'll stand up." I told her I was deciding, and then I did the slow, dull, devastating work that real receipts require. I requested my own records from the county. Every former foster youth has the legal right to their own file, and I exercised it. And 3 weeks later, 2 cardboard boxes arrived at Mercer House with my whole childhood in them, in the county's own ink. I sat on the floor of my office one night and read it cover to cover. The case plans, signed and abandoned, the hearing dates, the visit logs. Parent attended one of 4 scheduled visits. The goal, reset to reunification in the early years, and then simply left there, year after year in a clerk's neutral hand, because by then, no one was on the other side asking to change it. It was all there. It had always been there. I had just never been allowed to hold it before. One line stopped me for a long time. Under a column for my 11th birthday, a worker had written, in that flat clerical hand, "No contact from parent this period." No anger in it, no verdict. Just the fact, filed and forgotten. The way you file the thing that doesn't matter. I sat with that one line on the floor of my office until the building went quiet around me. My story, finally. In my own hands. I had an invitation mailed to Patricia Vance, a real one, cream cardstock, a seat at a table near the front. My records, my story to tell now. Before I tell you what I'd written in that email and what it did, I want you to guess. If you were me, 3 weeks out, what would you have said to the one man who could have handed my mother everything she came for? Tell me in the comments. Be honest about it. Then stay with me, because what actually happened was quieter than you're imagining, and it landed a great deal harder. Silence is a strategy, once you've stopped begging. The ballroom was beautiful and cold, the way rinks are cold. I noticed it the second I walked in. The over-conditioned air, the gleam of polished metal on every table, the particular hush of a room full of people waiting to be impressed and dressed for the privilege. The trio in the corner, the smell of cut flowers and warming chafing dishes. I have spent a very large portion of my life in cold rooms, waiting. Cold rooms, and I go way back. Donna came. She wore the one good dress she owned, gray with a small collar, and she stood near me, with her purse held in both hands the way she'd held it at the bus station 6 years before. At some point during the cocktail hour, she reached over and put her flat palm against my back, between my shoulder blades, and left it there for a while. She didn't say anything. She doesn't, much. She didn't need to. Patricia Vance sat at a table to the left of the stage, straight-backed in a blazer, a leather folder squared on her lap, watching the door like a woman who'd spent a career watching doors. I worked the room. I shook the hands and thanked the donors and let people tell me I was an inspiration, which is a word people use when they don't want to ask what happened to you. I kept one eye on the door the way Pat Vance did, the way you do when you grew up, never knowing who was about to walk in and change your address. And the whole time, underneath the trio and the small talk, I could feel her arriving, the way you feel weather change before it does. She came in on someone's arm. The intermediary from the texts, a man I didn't know, soft-handed, a fixer of some kind, signed her in at the door as his guest. It was smart, in its way. You don't crash a 400-person gala with a clipboard at the entrance. You walk in beside someone who belongs. Brooke trailed a step behind them both, smaller than I remembered, moving carefully, like a person who'd learned that morning how much it cost to stand up straight. Her dress had been let out at the seams. Her eyes moved over everything in the room except me. My mother crossed the floor and stopped a careful few feet away, and she dropped her gaze to the carpet and she said it. "Hello. I'm your mother, Bridget. It's been so long." She introduced herself. To me. There was a necklace at her throat, a thin gold chain with a single stone, the piece she used to take out at Christmas and say she'd be buried in before she'd ever sell. I understood, looking at it, how far down they'd gone. You don't wear your last good thing to a negotiation unless you've already counted everything else in the house and come up short. I didn't answer her. Not yet. I had waited 16 years. She could wait through the salad course. She did not wait quietly. By the time the plates were cleared, she had drifted to the table beside Gerald Voss, and I stood near the bar and watched her do the precise thing she'd come to do. The proud mother performance, pitched to carry, the light hand on the forearm, the lifted chin, and the bright, brimming eyes. I always knew my Bridget would do great things, she told the little cluster around Voss, just loud enough. We've been so close, the three of us. A mother just knows these things about her girls. Gerald Voss smiled at her. It was a strange smile, courteous and far away. The smile of a man watching a play whose ending he's already been told. She was too far inside the role to read it. Voss already knew. She didn't notice. She caught me alone in the side hallway just before the awards. And for exactly one sentence, the warmth fell off her face like a sheet off furniture. "One photo," she said, low and fast, all the sweetness gone flat. "One quote about how proud we are of each other. That's all I'm asking. Or the story in the paper tomorrow is about the woman of the year who turned her back on her own struggling mother and her sick sister on her big night." Brooke can barely stand up, Bridget. Think about how that looks. Think about your little house, your donors, your choice. There it was. The deadline and the small knife inside it. And the way she'd reached for Brooke's body, Brooke's real illness, and turned it into leverage without a flicker, the same way she'd once turned my whole childhood into a line she could cross off. She had set me a deadline I'd already beaten by 3 weeks. I looked at her for a moment, really looked, at the navy dress and the last necklace and the eyes that, even now, even threatening me, would not quite hold mine. And I said, very evenly, then I'd better make sure they get the story right. I left her standing in the hallway, and I walked up to the podium. A lie only works until someone in the room keeps receipts. They called my name. The applause came up warm and full. I lifted the crystal, felt its weight one more time, and set it down on the podium. I leaned into the microphone, and I kept my voice level, because level was the only weapon I had ever needed. "Thank you," I said. "I want to tell you why this house exists, and to do that honestly, I have to tell you the truth about a family, mine." The room settled into the particular silence of 400 people who came for a nice speech and have just realized they're about to get something else entirely. My mother says we've always been close. I let it sit a beat. We were 11 miles apart for 10 years. A murmur moved across the tables. At the far one, Lorraine went very still. Beside her, Brooke was looking down at her own hands, folded on the white linen. She did not say a single word in her mother's defense. Not then, not once, the whole night. "When I was a child," I said, "my sister's figure skating cost $28,000 a season. On my 8th birthday, I was given a $5 keychain and told the money was tight, and that next year would be mine. 3 months later, my mother signed me into foster care, drove 11 miles home, and never once made the drive back. That's not how it was. Lorraine was on her feet. Her voice cracked out across the room, too loud, the way a voice gets when it's defending the very last thing it owns. That is not how it happened. I did everything for that girl. Everything. You have no idea what I gave up. I didn't argue. Arguing is for people who don't have proof. I looked toward the screen behind me, and the first page came up, 10 feet tall. The county's own letterhead, a case plan, a date, a signature in chewed blue ballpoint that half the people in that room would have recognized as a mother's hand. "These are my records," I said. "I requested them myself. They're mine to show." I let the pages turn behind me. A signed plan, then a year of nothing. Another plan the next year, then a year of nothing. A visit log. Parent attended one of 4 scheduled visits. The goal line. Reset to reunification in the early years, and then just left there, year after year, in the county's own neutral ink, for everyone to read. Then Patricia Vance stood up. She did not raise her voice. She didn't have to. She'd come ready, the leather folder open in her steady hands, and the whole room turned toward the small, straight-backed woman beside the stage. "I was Bridget's caseworker," Pat said. "For 10 years. I'm retired now, so I can say this plainly. In the early years, every time the county moved to free that child for adoption, every time a family wanted her, her mother did the bare minimum to reset the clock. A visit, a class, a signature, then nothing until the next hearing." She paused. "And then that little girl got old enough that no family was asking anymore, and her mother didn't even have to do that. She just left the case open and walked away. Never freed, never wanted, never once brought home. I watched it for 10 years. I kept my own notes. I have the dates." At a back table, a woman said, "Oh my God," out loud into the silence. And I reached into the folder on the podium and lifted out a cream envelope, soft and furred at the corners from 16 years of being carried in a shoebox, in a blue suitcase, from one house to the next. I slowed down. This part I would not rush. I read it out loud, the way you read the only thing someone ever sent you. "Things are complicated right now. I'll come get you when they settle. Love, Mom." I set the letter flat on the podium, beside the crystal. "I was 12 when she wrote that," I said. "She never came." The silence in that ballroom had weight. You could feel it on your skin. My mother had 1 card left, and I stood there and watched her decide to play it. She turned, away from me, toward the table where Gerald Voss sat with his faraway smile. And she opened her mouth to reach for the one man who was supposed to save her. Gerald Voss stood up first. Lorraine. He said her name gently, and the gentleness was the worst part of the whole night for her, I think. "Bridget told me everything 3 weeks ago. I came tonight for her, not for an academy." That was the conversation I wouldn't give you. That is what I said across the untouched coffee. The truth, before the performance. He had been sitting 2 tables away the entire night, watching her walk toward a door that was already locked. Her last card was already face up on my table. Silence. And then it broke. But it broke in her. "You ungrateful little—" Her voice tore loose, high and shaking, the navy dress trembling with it. "After everything I sacrificed. Do you have any idea what I gave up for this family?" I stepped back to the microphone. I did not match her. I went the other way, all the way down to quiet, and I used her first name because that was all she had been to me for a very long time. Lorraine. The whole room froze on the single cold word. I was never the problem. I let the breath out. I was just the line in the budget that didn't fit. Then the room clapped. For me. The truth doesn't shout. It just stops protecting you. She found me in the side hallway afterward, the same hallway where she'd held the little knife an hour before. The performance was gone. What was left was smaller and more honest, and somehow worse to look at. Her hands were out, palms up, and the tears were real now. Finally, 16 years too late and aimed in entirely the wrong direction. Bridget, please, the Academy, Brooke, she's sick, you saw her, we're going to lose everything we have. You don't understand what these last months have been like. You don't know what it's been. Her breath hitched. One word from you to Gerald. One word and no. I didn't decorate it. The whole architecture of my life was inside that one word, and I let it stand alone in the hallway between us. She kept going, because people like my mother always keep going, right up to and past the edge. I'm your mother. I am still your mother. After everything, you kept your rights for 10 years, I said. You can keep them. I'm keeping mine. She looked at me then, finally, eyes all the way up, searching my face for the soft place that used to live there. The 8-year-old who counted exits, the 12-year-old who read 4 lines on the edge of a tub, the 15-year-old who wrote, "Do you remember me?" on a bus. She was looking for that girl, so she could press on her. That girl wasn't there. Donna had framed her years ago and hung her in a hallway, where she belonged. What my mother said next, I will remember for the rest of my life, because of what it wasn't. I'm sorry it came to this, she whispered. Not I'm sorry I left you. Not I'm sorry I chose her. I'm sorry it came to this. She apologized for losing. She never once apologized for leaving. That is exactly how I knew I'd been right all those years. To keep the receipts. If you've ever had to draw a hard line with the people who were supposed to love you first, I need you to hear me on this one. You are not cold. You are free. There's a difference, and it took me 16 years to learn it. Tell me one boundary you're proud of holding. I read every single one of them, and I mean that. Donna drove me home from the gala. We didn't talk much, the way we don't. At a red light, she reached over and patted my hand once, twice, and left her hand there until the light changed. At the door, she said, "You hungry? I've got bread." It was burnt, of course. I ate 2 slices standing at her counter, and it was the best thing I'd had in years. The consequences arrived without any help from me. They always do, once you finally stop standing between someone and the full weight of their own choices. Within the week, the Academy was surrendered. The notice on the glass became a chain and a padlock, and the local paper ran a short, final item with no comeback story in it. Within 2 weeks, the house I'd been signed away from, the one 11 miles down the highway, the one with the yellow porch light I'd watched go dark room by room at 15, went up for sale. A red and white sign staked into the front lawn where I used to imagine a car turning in to collect me. And in a consignment shop 2 towns over, a glass case slowly filled up with the things my mother had once sworn she would never, ever sell. The medals, the crystal sewn dresses, a pair of custom white boots, molded years ago to the shape of ankles that hadn't competed since 17. The skates that had cost a childhood sold for a fraction of one. The investment finally closed its books. Brooke texted me a few days after the gala. Just once. No call this time. Thank you for not pretending. I'm getting myself somewhere safe and I'm getting better. Getting out too. B. I read it standing in the Mercer house kitchen, with the smell of somebody's burnt toast in the air and 2 kids arguing good-naturedly about the thermostat down the hall. I thought about a girl in a warm-up jacket with snow on her shoulder, a girl who had also been handed a script at birth and told it was love. She had been the prize. I had been the cost. The truth, which took me most of my life to see, is that neither of us had ever simply been a daughter. I didn't answer right away. I had earned the right not to answer at all, but I didn't delete it either. I kept a door open, just for her. You don't owe anyone the door they slammed. A few weeks later, early spring, The first genuinely warm morning of the year, I drove the 11 miles myself. I didn't set out to make it a pilgrimage. I had a meeting on the far side of the county, and the fastest route ran along that same old stretch of highway, past the Sunoco with the sign that still flickered on the S, past the 2 exits I'd counted 10,000 times with my forehead against cold glass. I drove with the windows cracked and the radio low and a coffee going warm in the cup holder. This time, I wasn't driving toward her house. I was driving away from mine. Behind me, Mercer House was warm and loud and full. The smell of cheap coffee and a microwave dinner, the radiator ticking, a hallway lined with 22 doors, each one with a name on it that no hearing could revise. That very morning, a new girl had moved into the last open room. 16 years old. A blue garbage bag of belongings set down in the middle of the floor. Eyes that didn't trust the lock on the door yet, that flicked to the window and the exits the way mine used to. I'd watched her find the little nameplate beside her door and run her thumb across her own name once, slowly, the way Tyler had, the way I would have at her age, if anyone had thought to write it down. Before I left, she'd asked me, not quite looking at me, how long she could stay. People had asked her that as a threat her whole life. I told her the truth. As long as you need. Nobody resets a clock on you here. She didn't say anything, but she sat down on the bed like she might keep it. 11 miles. I used to measure it hoping she'd come. Now I drive it whenever I want. And I'm the one who's home. I passed the exit to the old house without slowing down. The for sale sign was still in the yard. I waited for the pull I'd braced myself for, the old ache, the lean toward a lit window. It didn't come. You can only ache toward a place while you're still waiting to be let in. And I had stopped waiting at 15 on a far sidewalk, watching the lights go out one room at a time. My mother spent her entire life certain she knew who was worth keeping. She was an expert in it in her own mind, the judgment, the instinct, the budget squared on the kitchen table. She chose the future and threw away the cost, and she stayed certain, right to the end, in a navy dress in front of 400 people, that her certainty had simply been unlucky. It wasn't unlucky, it was wrong. The line in the budget that didn't fit grew up and built a house full of doors that lock, and she has her name on exactly none of them. I keep things, you see. The $5 tag with its orange dot, the cream envelope with its 4 lines, the drawing of a crooked house under 2 suns. And the exact distance between the place that gave me away and the life I built without it. 11 miles. Proof I was never the one who left.